We are going to have three different mediums going on here. It's 7:59, so we're going to get started in just a second. Okay, so right now it's 7:59 p.m. We're recording on Zoom. We're going live on Facebook. And if my eyes and ears do not deceive me, we are also going live into my YouTube channel, Watch Get a Clue. So this is going to be exciting. We're going to get started here in just, well, less than a minute now. And even though we're already started on some level here, let me just make sure I see what's going on. Yeah, that's muted. Patty, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Beautiful. All right, great. So 8 o'clock straight up. Hello, if you're watching on the Facebook side. Hello to you, Patty, who has joined on the Zoom side, and hello to those of you that are watching on YouTube, whether that's live or the recorded version. We're going from Zoom, streaming in to YouTube, but I wanted to go live, and this was actually at Patty's suggestion or recommendation to see if we can get a little bit of a following increase, a little more. Maybe we can get more people joining on the Zoom side than just the same 2 or 3 every week. We've had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm fortunate every week that I've been doing this, there's at least one person on the line. And the idea is in Get a Clue in 52, I've got 52 tips. I'm going to read one tip and then pivot into a group conversation with whoever's on Zoom with me. So this is the first time I've ever done a Facebook Live. For those of you that are watching on Facebook and checking it out, consider coming into Zoom so that you can interact with me live. After I read this week's tip, we pivot. So for now, though, whatever you're doing, whatever else you could be doing, you've decided to be here. So thanks for that. But we want to go ahead and get into it. What is Get a Clue in 52? This is the second edition of the book that I self-published in 2019, Get a Clue in 52. Here's the first edition. Last year in 2020, I came on, I did a Zoom, and I live streamed it into the Facebook group for Get a Clue in 52. Towards the end of the year, I redid the book. I did a second edition. I reordered some things, cleaned up the formatting, changed the cover, a couple of enhancements. So we're going all over again. I'm going to read 52 tips again this year, this time streaming into YouTube to populate my YouTube channel, Watch Get a Clue, all one word. Watch Get a Clue. I want to populate YouTube with the 52 videos the same way I populated the Facebook group last year with 52 videos, and it's organic and it's not overproduced. There's no makeup and lights and mirrors and wardrobe, or there's none of that. It's just me, in my casual clothing on a Sunday night. Tonight I'm coming to you live from Houston, where my son got done playing another baseball tournament this weekend. Very, very, very incredible competition. AJ did a couple of nice things, struggled as well, struggled in a good way. It's just really healthy for him to see the level of competition. I'll digress there. But anyway, I'm in Houston right now. I'm at an Airbnb of all things. And, so it's not overproduced. It's not studio. It's not green screen. It's not major technology. I've got my phone over here going live on Facebook, and I've got my computer in front of me. I'm on Zoom, and we're streaming into my YouTube channel, Watch Get a Clue. So forgive me if I don't see your comments right away. Forgive me if I don't respond on the Facebook side, but I'm glad you're here joining us. Now, Get a Clue in 52 is 52 tips, 10 tips in 5 categories. Marketing has 2 extra tips to give me a full year's worth. And this is the 3rd week of the year, so in the 3rd tip of the year. And this time, we're starting with the communication section. Last year, in the first edition of the book, communication was the 4th section. So we got to it later in the year. Then we went to accountability, but now I'm coming back and starting off this edition of the book with communication. It's just, as I worked through it, as I read through the book, it just dawned on me that there would be a better ordering of the tips. So 2 weeks ago, the first week of the year, the first tip was to check baggage, or checking baggage. There's 3 things that we all bring to communication. We all bring our culture, we all bring the totality, all of our personal and past experiences, and we all bring our heredity, our physical characteristics that we didn't sign up for. Our height, our weight, our the shape and contour of our face, our skin color, the thickness, thinness of our hair, all of that stuff. We show up with those things to communication. So 3 major bags: heredity, culture, and personal past experience. And when we're aware of that, we become more aware of the meaning we make of communication. We also do a better job encoding our messages because we begin to look for and observe and notice other people's bags that they're bringing, and we want to speak into their listening, create some effectiveness in our communication, decrease instances of miscommunication or offending people out of ignorance, etc. So we moved on to tip number 2, which is invite all of your senses. This is what we talked about last week. Tip number 2 is tip number 2 talks about the difference between hearing and listening. And hearing is what we do with our ears. It's a physiological process, but listening is what we do with our mind. It's what we attend to. But we can attend to things, to more things than just what we hear. We can attend to anything that we observe. So if we replace the word hearing with observing, we can invite all of our senses to the listening party. We can pay attention to what we taste, pay attention to what we smell, pay attention to what we feel, pay attention to what we see, not just so we can listen. Listening is what we do with our mind, and hearing is what we do with our ears. There's a lot more that could be said. I even said here on page 19 of the book that we could go take a deeper dive on listening, and we would be diving into things like barriers to listening or forms of non-listening or tips for active listening and critical listening. There's a lot more to say about listening, but tip number 2 is just to start to understand the difference between hearing and listening, and invite all of your senses to the listening party. Pay attention to what you're observing with all of your senses, and you're going to be a better communicator. You're on your way to being a better communicator. So that brings us to tip 3. Hello, I see Todd is watching. Maggie, hello. I see you guys. Thanks on the Facebook side. Patty's still with me on the Zoom side. Jump on into Zoom. It's very easy to get into Zoom. tinyurl.com/get a clue. That's it. You'll pop right in and you'll be ready to have a group conversation. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to do a word for word read now. By the way, Sunday night cheers. Hopefully you're done watching your football and you're with us tonight. And what I'm going to do is read word for word now from the book, starting on page 20. Tip number 3 in the communication section. And the title is Overcome These and You'll Overcome a Lot. Overcome these and you'll overcome a lot. Here we go. There are 5 tendencies we are all guilty of that suffocate objectivity, listening, and dare I say, loving. One of my college mentors, Dr. Larry Samovar, taught me the following 5 barriers to critical thinking, which have a huge potential for dark side communication, parentheses, verbal aggression, name calling, bigotry, and shaming, to name a few, end parentheses. First is stereotyping, which is when we have observed or learned about characteristics that may exist in one member of a population, and then assuming that characteristic lives in all members of that population. The examples are usually, if not always, negative and categorical by race, gender, religion, sexual preference, and so forth. Excuse me. They are born in partial truth, but are not 100% true across the entire population, and can be funny at a stand-up comedian's show where the context is set for humor. But deep down, they are dangerous due to how wrong and hurtful they can be. A second personal tendency that prevents objective, loving, critical communication is being stubborn, or what the literature would call frozen evaluations. When we have made up our minds about something and then are either too lazy or too proud to consider any information that might contradict our original opinion, or it says here in the book, the original opinion. At its worst, frozen evaluations can have people ignoring and discrediting the objective truth because it is too much work or pain to have to see the world any differently. Personally, I will watch Fox and CNN after a major political speech by a president, wanting to understand the talking points on all sides with a curiosity if there is a way to see the speech differently than my original opinions. Most people get stuck in their ways and give credit to sayings like, "Can't teach an old dog new tricks." Are you guilty of being too stubborn? We all are. Can we reduce our stubbornness to be open and curious about other ways of seeing things? You bet. If what you believed to be true were not true, how soon would you want to know? A third behavior is called self-interest, where we ignore or block out any information that doesn't appeal to our interests, which is failing to create new interests. How many times do you ask somebody to try something you've discovered and you see them resist right away, even when you know they will love it? Think about how quickly you will change channels when channel surfing on TV, something in less than a second or two, or sometimes in less than a second or two. If it doesn't appeal to our immediate interests, we disconnect. I recommend always being open to being interested in new things and surrounding yourself with people who are as well. A fourth behavior that creates bad communication is called ego defense, where we ignore or attack any communication that is not consistent with our current sense of self. Imagine physical fight or flight response that makes us attack or run from physical danger, and continue to imagine flinching when a bee buzzes by your ear, or flinching or swatting at the same time to protect yourself and then seeing it as a fly instead of a bee, meaning you weren't in any danger at all, but instinctively protected yourself anyway. My favorite example is walking into a spider web face first, freaking out. It says that in all caps here in the book, all caps, freaking out when I walk face first into a spider web, jumping around and wiping myself off frantically, hoping there is no spider on me. Sometimes even taking my shirt and shaking it all around like folding bed sheets. Whap, whap. Then washing my hands and using the wet paper towel to wipe my face and head and neck. Now, totally certain that there's no spider on me, I walk underneath the air conditioning vent and feel my own hair get blown onto my ear. And immediately, all caps, immediately start jumping around and frantically slapping at my ear in case it was that damn spider, when all along it was my own hair. Can you visualize that? The point is that we often attack or run from things that are not an actual threat to us physically, just because we are hardwired to protect ourselves, otherwise called the survival instinct. In communication, we often attack or ignore people or ideas because instinctually we perceive them as a threat to our own current state of being or sense of self. It's amazing how quickly we will call a person or idea stupid, dumb, lame, foolish, or any negative adjective before we'd ever stop to just ask, I wonder what is awesome about that different way of doing things than how I do it. I would bet money that the greatest amount of bad communication is produced by instinctual ego defense versus open, curious, vulnerable, and loving communication. Finally, when groups of people are doing what individuals do during ego defense, it can be referred to as ethnocentrism. Ethno means culture, and centrism is placing or the placing of something in the central position of importance. So, ethnocentrism is essentially the dangerous and mistaken belief that one's culture is superior to all other cultures. It should go without saying how dangerous this belief behavior can be. I'm a big fan of being proud of your own culture, belief, politics, religion, or whatever. But when we believe those things about ourselves to be superior to differences in those things among others, it leads to things like fascism, racism, sexism, nationalism, and the cruel acts that a sense of superiority falsely justifies. The negative consequences of ethnocentrism at their worst lead to groups like the KKK or Hitler's Nazi culture. Remember that we are all hardwired to protect ourselves, and that is how these tendencies are possible at all. Undetected and without conscious practice avoiding them, we are vulnerable to making terrible mistakes in our communication. I strongly recommend learning more about these barriers to critical thinking, listening, objective, and loving communication. All right, there you have it. Tip number three, excuse me. Tip number 3 is in the books. It has been read now, word for word. Joining me live tonight, as she always does, is Patty Blakesley. She's on live with me on Zoom. So, Patty, I'm here if you want to ask any questions, make any contributions, give any feedback, etc. I can even.
want to relay a message from Charlie.
You want to relay a message from? I should get off headphones because here. I don't know. People can't even see. Oh, no, there we go.
That's a
Yeah.
door.
There's no way I can see. The thing is on live, I can't get your comments on live. I haven't figured that part out yet, but it's okay.
Well, Charlie's, there is a blackout and he's been messaging me, which apparently he's got just enough power to do that. So he's very unhappy to miss this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry he has to. We're always thinking about you. For those of you that are following on Facebook, you probably know the global connector, Charlie. He wants to be here and he's not here. Patty, can you still hear me?
Yep, I can. And
I'm going to
I
try to
was,
switch my audio source to see
I was
if I
thinking
can at
as
least get
you,
your audio coming through.
hmm, now I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. Can't hear you at all. Now it says it's connecting.
Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, very good.
So what this reminded me, it's a really long tip. Lots
It's
of reading.
yeah, it is. There's 5 tips in the tip. That's right.
Yes. Um, I remember a friend of mine saying, whenever you hear anything, you always go, isn't that interesting? Because her first response when she would hear something was to make a judgment. And I would usually go, that's interesting. And then I'd start to question what it was saying.
It's a good technique to give yourself pause for evaluation rather than very quickly jumping in with that first evaluation. I like to say emotion shows up to the party first, and then logic arrives fashionably late. So it's a real neat communication device. Oh, how interesting! Isn't that interesting? And if you could come up with, there's all kinds of others that you could come up with, but if you could come up with it, practice it, and insert them on the regular, and then make it into a habit, you'll always have that. You'll always have a little bit of more gap between stimulus and response
Right.
with when giving yourself that pause. That's awesome. Tell me more.
Well, I can remember we've had some pretty interesting talks, politically speaking, or, energetically speaking. And it is my go-to place is to be questioning what I've heard and, why it might be true, why it might not be true, whether there's more I need to learn or know about.
Yeah, it's great. Just to shout out to, I see Amanda and Men's on the Facebook side live. We're doing Get a Clue in 52. I'm doing it live on my own feed this time. They went into the group, the private group, Get a Clue in 52 last year. They're going into my YouTube channel this year, but I'm double dipping tonight. In addition to live streaming into YouTube, watch Get a Clue. We're going live. So Todd and Maggie and Amanda and Mins, nice to see you here on the Facebook side. Forgive me if I've missed anybody. Patty Blakeslee is with me on Zoom. So if you want to come on into Zoom and have some live interaction, it's very easy. Just go to www.tinyurl.com/getaclue. Otherwise, we got done reading tip number 3 from the communication section, and it's about critical thinking, 5 barriers to critical thinking. And if we can overcome these 5, we'll overcome a lot. And Patty had the astute comment that, yeah, this is a big tip. There's 5 tips in there: stereotyping, frozen evaluation, self-interest, ego defense, and ethnocentrism. And any one of those, you could write a whole book on it, right? Each of them at least could be their, 5 separate tips rather than bunched into one. And please understand, please understand, I wrote this in 2019, almost a year and a half ago. I wrote this, and it's interesting to reread it through the lens of what's happening today, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So thank you. Before, I'm not here to go down any political rabbit hole right now, but Patty, to bring your question back up to the forefront here, or your comment, isn't that interesting is a question. Okay. And so what are some other questions? How do you know? What led you to feel that way?
Right.
Can you imagine that others might feel differently? Do you have any idea why somebody would feel differently if they did? On a scale of 1 to 10, how open are you to somebody feeling differently? How much time do you have in your day to really, truly listen to, I'll tell you what, one of the things that's happening right now, to make it relevant is I see, I'm trying to stay neutral here, but I see one side, both sides, right? And I say both sides, right and left, blue and red, both sides. So let's say the blue, there's people in the blue that are saying, why is it so hard to give President Trump credit for his accomplishments? And they're compiling, he's done this and he's done this and he's done this and he's done this. And there's articles or memes or infographics or whatever that are making lists of President Trump's accomplishments, saying, can't we be proud of this president? Look at what he did, and then there's, other people saying, look at all of the lies that he's told, or look at all of the scandals, or look at all of the, questionable things that, and both sides are compiling lists. And what's the purpose of that? It's to try to get the other side to understand the other side, but both sides are busy putting their side forward rather than listening to the other side, right? And having discourse and respectful discourse. And I think everybody has the right to be either ashamed or embarrassed or disgusted based on how deeply held their values are, right? But how do we reduce our instinctual barriers to critical thinking? In one word, critical thinking is questioning, asking questions. So a lot of people out there are making statements. An infographic doesn't ask a question unless it's rhetorical, and most of them are based on fallacies of logic. The claim doesn't follow from the evidence and the reasoning, but it's put out there and they're so influential. So I pray that if nothing else, we just move the bar a little bit on our communication skills. We move the bar a little bit. Like, I hope that these 10 tips in the communication section from Get a Klu in 52, tip number 3 tonight, we got 7 more to go. I hope we can become a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more loving, lead with a little more listening, understand a little bit more about the baggage everybody's bringing, lengthen the fuse, extend the time between stimulus and response. And Patty, what you talked about, questions, asking questions, responding first with questions really helps us out quite a bit. So thank you for that. What else? Anything else? Normally I'd say, well, Charlie, what do you got? Or who else is on the line?
I have to ask you for a Klubi snack, right? But
yeah, really. Hello,
like
Amy Taylor, for chiming in.
I like the lead with listening.
Yeah, lead with listening. I mean, a Klubi snack, listening is love. Done. There's a Klubi snack. Listening is love. Because we will talk about this in other tips later on in the book. But love, well, we've talked about this all the time. Love is the willingness to be vulnerable. I'll say that again. Love is the willingness to be vulnerable so that either you or your beloved may grow. And so when we're listening, we're vulnerable, right? A lot of people talk because they don't want the discomfort of being called out, being questioned, being judged, or hearing information that isn't consistent with what they want to think, feel, or talk about in the moment. If I want to think about this, talk about this, to have to listen makes me vulnerable. I'm not doing my own thing anymore. Now I'm listening to somebody else's thing. But I love the big difference between vulnerable and threatened. They're not the same. Vulnerable is not the same thing as threatened. Just because we could get hurt, could waste our time, could get offended, could get frustrated, doesn't mean we're gonna. And so often, like, I love the difference between being offended versus taking offense. That might be my next flyby coaching video on my way home. I'm in Houston, everyone, in town for my son's baseball tournament. But nothing's going to stop me from doing Get a Klu in 52. But I got another flight. Why waste a good flight, mask and all? I'm going to rock a flyby coaching video. I did one on the way here, 2 flights, boom, boom. I'm going to do one on the way home. And maybe that's the one. What's the difference between being offended and taking offense? All right, unravel that one. So here we are, Get a Klu in 52. Tip number 3 was tonight. It's all about overcome these 5. Overcome these, you'll overcome a lot. And these 5, they're 5 barriers to critical thinking. They're all personal tendencies: stereotyping, self-interest, frozen evaluations, ego defense, and ethnocentrism. And if we can overcome these, not totally because we're human. I teach this. I've been teaching this for 25 years, it seems. And I'm still guilty because I'm a human being. We're all hardwired to protect ourselves. And all 5 of these barriers to critical thinking, they're forms of defense. They're forms of self, ego defense, stereotyping. Haha, if I can make fun of that person, that means I'm cool. Like if they're a bad driver, I'm a good driver, all of that stuff, right? So So it's staying in the comfort zone and are rooted in our subjective comfort zone. And, I'm all about growth, right? Personal, professional growth is what I want to promote. So the five barriers to critical thinking, if we can overcome them, if we can get better at it, detecting when that's happening and get more curious, lead with more questions, have more compassion, have more tolerance, have more understanding, this world might vibrate back closer to unity than the divisiveness that we've seen. So I just want to do my part. I want you to do your part as well. Everybody knows. I mean, everybody watching or listening right now, and thank you if you are, because there's other things you could be doing and you're here instead checking out to see if there's value. I hope it's valuable for you. But everybody listening has said, oh, well, the problem is communication. Oh yeah, I know what the problem is. The problem is bad communication. There's so many problems, there's so many challenges, there's so many mistakes that have gone on in people's lives, and everybody knows that communication would have fixed that. But who's out there getting better at it? Communication. Who's studying it? Who's committing to learning it? Who's spending time exercising and practicing techniques and devices and strategies that will get us out of those dark side communication scenarios and into loving, compassionate, unifying, loving communication. So that's what I'm all about. And I'm not perfect. I'm guilty. Sometimes I get into dark side communication, and it's not my intention. You'd be surprised how careful we have to be with the words that we're using, and how easy it is for people to get on the defensive, whether you have in fact offended them intentionally or unintentionally, or whether they have in fact taken offense to then make the fact that they're offended what you're really talking about now, instead of the argument they're trying to get out of. That happens a lot. People don't have an answer for the argument. If you're presenting a good argument, logic, reasoning, and evidence supporting a claim, if you put one of those in front of somebody that doesn't have that, then they're going to get offended real quick, and then it's going to go into personal attack. So we can diffuse that if we can overcome the barriers to critical thinking. We can get better. I can get better. You can get better. We can get better. So that's where I'm at tonight with tip number 3 for the year. Tip number 3 in the first section of the book, communication. Let me zoom in. There's 5 sections: communication. Then we're going to move on to marketing, networking, sales, and then accountability. That's the order that we're going to go in this year. And I'm excited. Second year that we're doing this. I might do this every Sunday for the rest of my life. Maggie, let's see. Why I haven't tuned into these before, I don't know. This is great. Thank you, Maggie. Well, listen, check this out. You can come in on the Zoom site if you actually want to be a part of the conversation. Just go to www.tinyurl.com/getaklu. You don't even have to turn on your video camera if you don't want to. You can just join and say hello and all of that. It's Sunday Night Casual. I'm just here to show up. And the other reason that you haven't joined them before is this is the first time that I'm streaming live to my personal page. What I tried to do last year, and I did it quite successfully. We got about 650 people joined the group, Get a Clue in 52. So if you type in to your, search for groups, Get a Clue in 52, you'll find the group, you'll be able to join, and you'll see all of the videos that were posted from last year, all 52 tips. I read them and streamed them into the YouTube, the Facebook group. This year, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just streaming it into my Get a Clue channel. So I want you to subscribe to Watch Get a Clue, all one word, right? Watch Get a Clue, all one word on the YouTube side. And that's where I'll be streaming live. I don't know if I'm going to go live on Facebook every week. I'm doing it tonight because Miss Patty suggested, hey, let's get some more people going. Let's get some more people live. And I figured Facebook has, such a good reach. Why don't I go live on Facebook while I'm otherwise streaming into YouTube? So my goal this year is to stream 52 consecutive readings, right? Read the whole book into the YouTube channel. So at the end of the year, there'll be 52 videos all around every tip in my book, right? So that's what my plan is. But as often as I can stream live, I will. It's nice to have you guys on here. But Patty can't see you. She's on Zoom with me, and you can't see her. She's amazing. Patty, she's smiling right now. And if I can get everybody on Zoom, it could be a lot cooler. So consider joining on the Zoom side, but I'm happy to have you here no matter how you join us. I'm grateful. And you know that, Maggie. It's good to see you. All right. So 8:28 p.m. Pacific time, although it's 10:29 now, it strikes 10:29 in the central time zone for me. And we just got done reading tip number 3 of Get a Clue in 52. And we've got 49 tips to go. We're going to be here every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time. On the Zoom side, it's www.tinyurl.com/get a clue. Come on into Zoom and join the conversation once I'm done reading the tip. Or you could just be a voyeur and just watch on the YouTube channel. Watch Get a Clue, all one word. Watch Get a Clue. It just so happens that tonight I thought I would throw my phone up on the, and hoisting it up on a lamp and go live on the Facebook side and reach out to, what kind of reach. This is the first time I've streamed one of these live on Facebook, so it's kind of fun. Or like on my personal Facebook, I did it all year long into the private group. And so that's what I want you to do. Join the private group, subscribe to Watch Get a Clue, or on Sunday nights at 8 p.m., come on into Zoom with me, be a part of this conversation. Tonight, we talked about tip number 3 from the communication section, which is overcoming 5 barriers to critical thinking. They are stereotyping, frozen evaluations, self-interest, ego defense, and ethnocentrism. And I just really scratched the surface in introducing those to you. And there's a lot. Each of these tips, you could go cluba diving on all of them. They bring up a lot. And we talked about that a lot. Last year, we had 90-minute sessions, hour and 15-minute sessions. They may not go that long this year, especially if we don't have that many people joining on Zoom, which is fine. Once I get the tip read, I'm happy. The rest is bonus for me. Patty, what else? Do you have any other questions or comments or anything before we dismiss for tonight? Let's go ahead and go last call.
Not really. I was thinking, though, that stereotyping and frozen evaluation seem very similar to me.
They are. Do you want me to ask you about the differences, or do you want me to comment on the differences?
Oh, I'll go for a comment. And the only thing I can
comment for 200, Chuck. Go ahead. No, sorry.
No, the only thing that, kind of reading over what you said, that the stereotyping is something that we have a belief in, whereas a frozen evaluation is more of a action. Like we're frozen, we're not acting.
Well, like when you look at a frozen evaluation, forget the literature terminology. That's what it'd be called in the literature, frozen evaluations. Like on an everyday terms, like you mean being stubborn, right? So where they're similar is frozen evaluation is where we make up our mind about something, and now regardless of whatever new information comes along, we'll systematically reject that because the original evaluation, it has become our comfort zone. So we freeze it. We freeze the original evaluation, and now we're rock hard impervious to any other information. So what you'll have, like for example, I mean, it sucks. I hate to bring this up, but the election, right? That's the most recent thing, right? The election was what? Legit or fraudulent, right? If you have it in your mind, the election was legit, right? Then it doesn't matter how many, quote, sworn affidavits, the other side has and that they're presenting in front of court, you think it's legit. Now, if you think it was a fraud, right? It doesn't matter how many courts throw you out. Your frozen evaluation is, it doesn't matter if the Supreme Court of the United States says you have no case, you are still going to ignore that, stick to your original opinion. Does that make sense?
Right, no, it does make sense, but is that any different than stereotyping?
Yeah, here's where it's different. Yeah, here's where it's different. Here's where it's different, is that stereotyping is specifically linked to populations of people. Okay, so stereotyping is specifically or characteristics of people, right? So in other words, an election has nothing to do, like election is just a happening. It's not like, how should I say this? Let me backtrack. Stereotyping is when you observe characteristic in one member of a population, and then without questioning or doing any research, you decide all members of that group share that characteristic. So,
okay.
Does that make sense? So it's like, and what stinks, it's hard to say. I'm not, I'm careful about this live. Hello, Susan, I see you out there. Thanks for joining. And those of you that have joined, like Maggie and Steven and Amy and Amanda and Todd, thank you so much for joining. We're talking about 5 barriers to critical thinking, which is tip number 3 in Get a Clue in 52. And what we're talking about specifically is how different are frozen evaluations from stereotyping. And frozen evaluation can be like the sky is falling, right? And if once you think the sky is falling, doesn't matter what, or the earth is flat. It doesn't matter if we show you pictures of a, you're still going to stick to your thing. Whereas the same thing with what's similar about that in stereotyping is you ignore objectively true information. That's where they're similar. You ignore objectively true information and you decide that, quote, I mean, let me put a disclaimer out there for anybody that's watching or listening. Disclaimer: the stereotypes you are about to hear do not necessarily reflect the opinions or beliefs or lifestyle of the host. Okay, disclaimer, right? But you get, Italians are all in the mob, or blondes are all dumb, or jocks are all dumb, or you understand, the Asians are bad drivers, and you just watch stand-up comedy for an hour and you'll see stereotypes being thrown all over the place. You follow? And the trick about the lure of stereotypes is that they are based in partial truth. I mean, somehow, some way, these characteristics were observed in these people, and probably more than once. But we can't just stop thinking there and assign those characteristics to all members of that population.
Got it. Now I
Does that
see
make
what
sense?
the difference.
So yeah, it's stereotyping is specific to people and peoples and characteristics of people, where a frozen evaluation can be a stereotype, but like, in other words, let's put it this way: one is a form of the other, but not the other way around. In other words, all stereotypes are kind of like frozen evaluations, but not all frozen evaluations are stereotypes.
Got it.
If that makes sense. Where they overlap is that they keep us rooted in our subjective comfort zone. Where they overlap is that instead of asking questions and being vulnerable to what the answers are, we just make statements and tell the world how the world is, rather than growing and loving and being compassionate, listening, and all of that other stuff. So that's a great, thanks for giving me the opportunity to make that distinction. Thanks for the question. Question is about the difference between stereotypes and frozen evaluations, 2 of the 5 barriers to critical thinking that were discussed in tip number 3 of Get a Clue in 52, second edition of the book. Now, let me take a moment to let everybody out there know that what's cool about the second edition of the book, is I'm holding it in front of both cameras I'm appealing to, right? Is that this one has a preview chapter of my next book, The Integrity Game. My next book that I come out with, and it will be this year, is called The Integrity Game. The preview chapter sets the scene for the whole book. And oh man, am I excited about this. So this is what last year's version, or the first edition of the book, looked like. Forget that, right? This is the one you want, baby. This is the one that we're looking for. Version number 2. So this is available on Amazon, but check it out. Let me say this. I'm raising money for a charity. There's a good friend of mine who's a colleague and a student, and now we do lots of great stuff together. His name is Vipul Dayal, and he and his family started a charity called Charity for Hope, and I'm raising money for his charity. So if you want to get a copy of Get a Clue in 52, and if you want it privately or personally signed by me and mailed out from me to you rather than delivered through Amazon, then go to www.tinyurl.com/GAK, the letter N, 52CFH. All right, hopefully somebody got that and can type it in the comments. I'll say it again. It's tinyurl.com/GAK, the letter N, 52CFH. If you go to that website, it's a set price, $50 instead of the $20.20 through Amazon, $50 in the overage. After I get it shipped out to you, the overage goes to Charity for Hope, and I'll personally sign it. So let me know if you want your own copy of Get a Clue 52 personally signed. Otherwise, go on to Amazon and get a copy for yourself and the community and the team and the family and the corporation and the association. Everybody should have one. I'm ready to do keynotes from any of the tips in this book, and I'm especially ready to do a keynote around the integrity game. So there's my plugging for the book itself. Patty, you're still on live with me on Zoom. For those of you, I see Carrie has jumped on board. Hello, nice to see you on the Facebook side. Listen, if you ever want to come on live and get a part of the conversation and jump in Zoom with me, that's just tinyurl.com/getaklu. Very easy to join live on the Zoom side like Patty does every single week to be a part of the conversation after I read the weekly tip. So here we are, Get a Clue in 52. It's episode or tip number 3 for this year. Tip number 3 in the communication section. And we got 49 tips to go. So it's great to see those of you that have joined on the live side. I see Faye. Oh, one of my old students, Faye. How are you, Faye? I see you out there. Mwah, big hugs to you. It's so great to see people coming on board on the Facebook side. I see David. All these people are joining in now. What do you say, Vato? David, how are you? We're finishing up now. It's a shame because people are coming on board on the Facebook side, but that's all right. Get a Clue in 52 was tip number 3 tonight. I'm in Houston for my son's baseball tournament that wrapped up earlier today. MLK weekend, perfect game tournament. They, really good competition, really good experience for AJ, but nothing's going to keep me from doing my Sunday night Get a Clue in 52. We're in the second edition of the book, which has a preview chapter for the integrity game. Hi, Faye. It's great to see you. Big hugs and kisses to you. And thanks, as always, to Patty for joining me on Zoom. So I have somebody to talk with after I read the weekly tip. Patty, I'm going to offer you last call before we wrap up for tonight.
Well, I just want to say thank you, because every time you go over a tip, even though you did it last year, it's always more information and more understanding on my part. So I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, one of the tips that isn't in here in the communication section is that repetition is a key to communication. So we did this last year, but we're doing it again this year. And it wasn't that long ago that we read that tip, but
No.
the world is different now. I'm different now. You're different now. So it's worthwhile to go over this again, especially as we're building community, bringing like minds together. I'm seeing new faces, new names on the Facebook Live side. Hopefully, thank you guys. Please get out and order the book. And if you ever want me to do a live reading for your community, or if there's anything I can do around the book, if a keynote, a live reading, signing copies for kids, this book is very digestible for anybody high school age or older. And if I would have read this book when I was in high school, I'd be a lot more successful now than I am now. And things are pretty good right now. And that's mostly because Marianne said yes when I proposed to her. And we got these amazing kids, and that keeps me getting out of bed trying to help people every day. So God bless Marianne. God bless my kids. AJ and I are coming home soon from the baseball tournament, but nothing's going to stop me from doing my Sunday night Get a Clue in 52, coming to you live from Houston tonight. Patty, anything else from you before we sign off for tonight? You ready to seal it with a kiss, as we always do? And for those of you on the Facebook side, when you have the book in your hands and you're on the Zoom side, we always seal everything with a kiss, which means I bring my face up and I go mwah, like that. So you don't have a book, you can't join me, but I'm going to go ahead and give Patty and seal it with a kiss right now. Ready? Here we go. Get a Clue in 52. Tip number 3, signing off. Mwah. Thanks, Patty. Good night now.
Travels home.
Will do. Thank you. Thanks for everybody that joined on the Facebook side. Thank you. I love you all.